Okay, welcome to Plugin School, how to build plugins. My name is Christine LaFay. I'm your host. My wonderful co-host with me every week is Thomas John for wrangling and any time. Um, when I try to move my mouse, because we no longer use the www, we need editor.sudowrite.com/app/plugins. And this is our plugin directory, which we'll come back to. So when
So we
you're,
lost the very beginning of what you were saying. And have you started
oh,
recording? You have started recording. Sorry about that.
I have
It,
started
you're
recording.
good now, but when you started talking, it we dropped you for a few seconds.
My apologies. Um, the important stuff. I hope that at the end of this class today, anybody who has not previously built a plugin will have the confidence and ability to build one after we go over all of the basics here in class today. Um, Now, when you're building a plugin, you're going to go to the plugins page, which if you don't have it bookmarked, um, you can get to it by clicking on plugins from a project page and clicking on explore plugins. That will bring you right here. Or if you're on your home page with list all your projects, the link for plugins is right here. You just click on that and it'll bring you the same place. We'll need one of those open. But when you go to create a plugin, it's this button right here. Um, your screen is not going to be the same color as mine, but the button will be in the same place underneath these highlighted plugins on the plugin directory page. Just click the create plugin button right here. And this is how you start to build a plugin. I just remembered how I wanted to build the plugin, so I do want to open a separate tab with the plugins page. And I didn't do that. Just click that. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about first is just an overview of what all these different fields are. If you're building a plugin in basic mode, which is the easiest way to build a plugin, um, you can't do as many things in basic mode, but it does make it very simple for you to be able to create a plugin without really knowing too much technical stuff. Um, you have the name, description, visibility, instructions visibility, category, your instructions, and whether or not you choose to enable Story Bible. So we'll go through all of these things one at a time here on the Create Plugin page. For name, you have to choose a short, distinct name for your plugins. Um, then as you can see, it's going to yell at you if you don't do that because name is a required field. It's going to do the same thing when I tab away from description as well, because you have to tell people what your plugin does and how it works. Visibility here, that's going to be where you can decide if you want it published so that everybody can see your plugin in the plugin directory, or you can choose for it to be unlisted so that only you can see it unless you share the link with someone else, and then anybody who has the link can click on it to see and use your plugin. There are reasons that you'd want to keep plugins unlisted, especially if you're working on one and it's not quite finished yet and you're still testing, but you want to save it so you don't lose everything. You're going to want to have it unlisted so that you can keep working on it without worrying about browser crashes and stuff, losing all your work. We'll actually do that by default for this one, just while we're working on it. Instructions visibility is another set of options for you, where you can either choose to hide the instructions or make them visible so that everybody can see the instructions. And the way I would like to do this is to show you plugin I actually wrote up real quick last week when they announced that we were doing Claude 3.5 Sonnet was added as a new model that we could use here on Sudowrite. And Michael asked me if I could create one of my Ask the Model Anything plugins to help demonstrate it. I initially did a version of it that doesn't look at Story Bible, but this happens to be the one that does look at Story Bible. And I made my instructions visible, and that's here, instructions visibility, so that people could see the instructions that I am giving to Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And you don't have to do that. You can hide your instructions for a variety of reasons. If
So
they're too complicated,
I think it's good to point out that there's you on your plugin, you have a really extensive description and you
I
have
do.
really nice instructions. So, there's a difference between these two items.
Yes.
These that are,
Yes.
yeah,
All of this is stuff that I put, everything I've highlighted here that you can see in blue, this is all in the description field of my plugin. Now, the instructions that I have chosen to set to visible are what you see here under instructions, where it starts in this slightly lighter colored um, um, yes, place
gray
here.
box. Yeah.
Box. Thank you. I'm like, there's a very simple word. I just can't find it. Um, and there are two parts to instructions that you give to plugins. There's the system instructions, and then there's the user instructions, and we will get to the difference between those when I switch from basic to advanced here for our demonstration purposes. And you also have to select a category for your plugin, and your options are narrative and plot, character development, editing and revision, scene enhancement, world building, analysis and feedback, marketing, genre specific, multilingual, and then you got to scroll down to see other. Um, and basically, you just try to figure out where your plugin belongs based on its purpose. And if none of these seem particularly relevant, you choose other. Um, I should note that on the plugin directory page, there is no category for other. The only place other plugins are going to show up is on this list of all plugins, which maybe I should suggest in feedback. There should be a way to just view other plugins to see all the miscellaneous ones that don't fit into the other categories neatly. Um, I feel like that's something that they shouldn't be hidden. Because there are a lot of plugins to scroll through on the all page. Um, and the instructions that you give, that's this part of our basic mode plugins field. Sudowrite will read the highlighted text or before the cursor, then follow these instructions. Um, and this is the default dummy text that they put in there just to show you the type of things you can write in here. And what they have for dummy text is rewrite the text to add more lush descriptions that you'd find in I think that should be an urban fantasy YA novel set in San Francisco. You have latitude to change the tone if necessary. Keep the rewritten text about the same length as the original. So we're not going to keep those instructions during this class. We're going to actually build a new version of this plugin because my Ask a Model Anything plugins, not all of them are Story Bible aware, and I need to make Story Bible aware versions of the ones that have enough context to do so. But when you're doing basic plugins, you do have the option to either just give it the instructions here, or you can enable Story Bible data, allowing you to tell the plugin to read the brain dump, the genre, the style, the synopsis, the characters, the outline, and or world building. Um, and just to let you know, because there are, when we look at the more advanced options for building a plugin, there are two different versions of characters and world building that you can use as Story Bible context. Um, for the basic plugins, this is going to be the highlights of what's in your character section of your Story Bible and the highlights of what's in world building. It's going to come up with a summary of that information and decide what's the most important before it feeds it to the plugin. Because otherwise, there's a separate variable that will let you look at all of your character information and all of your world building, but that can take up a lot of the context that the plugin is going to use, and it will cost more credits. So there are options. But for basic plugins, this is just going to do a summary of the characters and a summary of your world building, and it's going to decide what the most important things are to tell the plugin about them. So let's go back here. And oh, one thing I didn't cover about basic plugins, you'll notice there's no option to change the LLM, the model that the plugins use when you're creating a basic plugin. So by default, I think it's still using ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo um, as the default model. Um, but we have many more options now that you can't actually use unless you switch to advanced mode, which is what we're going to do. Now, the advanced mode plugins, you get a couple more things that you can tweak as far as fields go. You get preceding text, highlighted text. Oh, I do have to update this because this is the outline I used for this class the last time I taught it. We have new variables now, so we have new fields, and I will add that here in just a moment. You can set the minimum and maximum words for preceding text, highlighted text, and now user input, which actually will come before the preceding text. We're doing this live. We have a new user input variable, which I will demonstrate in a moment. Preceding text, highlighted text, additional variables list, system instructions, which I showed you in here, and user instructions, which is technically what you're writing in a basic plugin. What it says here for your instructions are what we call user instructions in advanced mode. And I will show you what the difference is between them as we go along. All right, we'll get to the AI options after we start filling in some fields here. So instead of just trying to brainstorm a new plugin completely from scratch, I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to replicate an existing plugin and just so that it uses a different model. And for that, I can copy and paste. So take a look at this. This is the latest plugin I created, the Ask Claude 3.5 Sonnet Anything with Story Bible 2. I'm going to click on Edit here so that you can see all the different fields look like when they're filled in. And then I'm going to copy and paste most of the information into the new plugin we're going to build together in class. So first, the title. I recommend choosing an emoji that people can use to search specifically for your plugins in the plugin directory at the beginning of the name of your plugin. I use the fairy emoji because LaFay. That's my pen name it's fairy. And then you have the name of your plugin, and then I like to also include an emoji at the end that at least tangentially relates to what the plugin does. In this case, I have a person raising their hand so that it shows that they're asking Claude question. Um, this model or for this version of the plugin, let's just go ahead and do um, Haiku, um, which is another Claude model. Um, so this is going to be Ask Haiku Anything, and it's going to be the version that is aware of Story Bible 2 content. Um, if you're a new user, Story Bible 2 doesn't necessarily mean anything to you. We just recently, within the last month, um, got upgraded from the old Story Bible to let us add more information to the characters field, and we got the new world building section as well. So we have a name, which was the first necessary thing we had to do for our plugin. Now we have to write a description, which is to tell writers how to use the plugin and give an example of how it works. The last couple of times I taught this how to build plugins class, I just was coming up with plugins off the top of my head and typing in a description as we went. But since I decided to, make this a practical use of my time, I'm going to take the instructions I already or the description I already wrote for this other plugin, and we're just going to change anywhere it says Claude 3.5 Sonnet to haiku. Um, because there is a plain old Ask Haiku Anything that isn't Story Bible aware. So the only thing that changes is that it will have the SB2 at the end of the name. So when you're, I also recently taught a class about best practices for writing your descriptions. And this is a lot more complicated than you need to get. You don't have to have a very detailed description like this. Um, I can show you a couple other people's description. You know what? I'm gonna I'm gonna show you mine because I set them up in a particular way. I'll actually show you the plugin description template that I created after my best practices class a couple weeks ago. Nobody needs to actually add this to their plugins unless you just want to remember that it exists. Um, the description. This plugin serves no other purpose than to provide plugin authors with an easy-to-use, customizable template for plugin descriptions. Copy and paste this description into your plugin description field to get started. Replace this first paragraph with the purpose of your plugin, i.e. what your plugin does. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but if you're interested as a plugin author in trying to tell your other plugin users the best way to use your plugin, you can go to this plugin description template, copy and paste it, and just change what you need, delete the parts you don't need. Um, I like to tell people what model we use, what the plugin looks at, how the length of any preceding text, highlighted text, or output. I should also add in user input as a new field here. And then um, I put in versions of the plugin. That's completely optional. And this was something that other plugin authors did and recommended I do with mine, was to show a cost estimate for how many credits the plugin uses. And I came up with the detailed information to show people, for comparison's sake, this is how much this plugin looked at and produced, and this is how much it cost me. So if you have more or less, you can base it off of that. So, okay, this is actually Claude 3.5 Sonnet. This is the one we're doing now here. So I can take out this bit because that was only relevant for Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Okay, I have a little money bag here to let people know that this plugin reads all of your raw story Bible information, so it may cost a lot of credits to run with the full story Bible. Although this is haiku, it does not cost as much as Sonnet. I'm still going to leave something in here about it because you never know. Um, and I have um, a warning about how Claude models are more censored than other models. And if you get a refusal message because it doesn't like the content that you are asking it about, you will still get charged credits because it has already read your Story Bible information and any highlighted text or user input that you provide. So that's something to always be aware of, both when making plugins and using them, is that they use credits just to read stuff, not just to write stuff. So it's based on both, and a refusal counts as using the plugin. So just something to be aware of. Then we have the model going to be used. We're using Claude 3 Haiku, and this is something I'm going to have to do manually down here, is we're going to have the plugin look at brain dump, genre, style, synopsis, characters raw, outline, world building raw, highlighted text, and user input. I need to change this here. Nope. I don't have to have that in here at all. And we will update this once we run a test. Okay, so just for now, until we get this plugin ready to go, we're going to keep it unlisted. And because the purpose of this plugin is basically just so that you can give it any instructions you want, we're going to keep the instructions visible, because the actual instructions of what you're going to ask the plugin to do are typed in by the person who's using it. What category did I put this in? Analysis and feedback. I put this in analysis and feedback because I use this family of plugins to ask it questions about text type already written. You can use it for any reason you want, but that's where I decided it belonged because that's what I use it for. Now, you can that they spelled preceding wrong here. That's upsetting. Um, I never noticed that before. I think that changed. So preceding text is how much text plugin would read back before the cursor, wherever the cursor is in the text. Not all plugins, you're not going to want preceding text in all of your plugins. This one in particular, I do not use, it does not use preceding text. So we don't need to worry about the minimum and maximum number of words for it. But it does look at highlighted text. And what I did for the other version of this plugin, because the context window for the Claude 3 models and now the Claude 3.5 models is they have a really large context window of up to 175,000 words of input. So I break it down into 150,000 words for highlighted text if you want it to look at a whole story. It doesn't have to be. You don't even have to use highlighted text in this, but since it is one of the variables we're going to use, we're going to put the maximum at 150,000. By default, it puts it at 2,000, so we're just increasing that a bit. And okay, this is now below preceding and highlighted text. I believe it wasn't when it first came out. We're going to click the button to toggle on allow users to give instructions. This is brand new last week, and I haven't played around with it too much like I wanted to because there's just so much stuff, too many shiny things to play with in the last week with Sudowrite. But this is a brand new thing where you can, instead of having um, you necessarily ask a question by highlighting, like typing your question into your document in your project, in your story. Like if I was here, I previously would have typed something in here for highlighted text, and that would have been the instructions for what I was asking this plugin to do. But now, this will pop up a little window, and you can just have the user type their question into that little pop-up, allowing them to highlight the text they want it to look at instead of the question that they want to ask. So we also have to customize the pop-up, and um, I literally will just copy. Now, how did I do that in this one? Okay, yeah, we'll copy it from over here from the other plugin. Now, the instructions that the text that you put here doesn't have to be like what the name of your plugin is, like mine. Since the name of my plugin is just Ask Haiku Anything, like that's literally all the instructions need to be for this user input pop-up. But like it says here, if your plugin generates series outlines, you might ask the user, how many books do you want in your series? And then a little pop-up window will show that question that you typed into this box. It will show that to the user, and they'll type in however many books, like 3 or 5 or 21, whatever. Um, and then the plugin will look at that information and go from there. We are able to select minimum and maximum word count for user input. I don't change the minimum from 0. The whole point of the plugin is to ask it a question. So I just let people type in whatever they want to ask, whether that's one word, which could be weird, but maybe there's a way to ask one word questions for the plugin. The maximum words, let's see, what did we go with here? We had 10,000 words because then we have up to 16,000 or 160,000 for the context with some wiggle room. But these numbers for the maximum word count are going to vary greatly depending on which model you're going to use for your plugin, which I'll point out we have not actually selected yet in building our plugin. We've given it a description, we've done all this part, we've given it some minimum maximum word count, we've told it what the pop-up should look like when the user runs the plugin, and now we can get to writing the actual prompt for the plugin. This is our growing list of available variables that you can use in a plugin. As few or as many as you want, this is what we've got to work with. The most basic one is highlighted text. It's anything the user highlighted, and preceding text, which is any text immediately preceding the cursor. So some plugins will ask you to put your cursor at the end of your story so that it will read back the whole story. And other plugins, you don't want to use preceding text. You just want it to look at what you highlighted. So these are both in basic plugins. By default, it always looks at highlighted and preceding text, unless, or it will at least look at those two things, and it will let you choose some of these additional variables if you toggle it for using Story Bible. But it doesn't give you all of these options unless you're in advanced mode here. We have brain dump to have it look at brain dump and Story Bible, genre, style, synopsis, and then this is where we have two different options for looking at characters data. Now, in your characters section in your Story Bible, we no longer have just one big empty box that you fill in with paragraphs of character descriptions. We now have fields for individual characters with individual fields for traits. Now, in basic plugins, it's going to use this plain old characters variable, which is described here as characters from the Story Bible optimized by the saliency engine. And that's what I was explaining earlier. That's the highlights of what um what the AI is looking at. It selects what it thinks is most important about your characters, and that's the information that it gives it if you use the characters variable in these brackets here. Or you can choose characters underscore raw, and that will bring in all of your character information from Story Bible, raw and unoptimized. That will show it literally every character and every trait for that character, unless you've specifically hidden them, which is another thing we've recently gained the ability to do. I'm not going to show you how to toggle things on and off in Story Bible for characters and world building, but they are options now um, to help you control how much information um, the AI is looking at when you run your plugins and stuff. So you can choose either the summary of the characters or the raw characters. And I often use raw character data in plugins that are Story Bible aware, with the models that have more context available to them, just because I don't know what the AI just thinks is important or not. I want it to take all of the information that I have given it and use that information when I'm running the plugin. I don't want any question as to whether or not it's going to see the specific information that I think is important. And then there's also outline. Scene summary is a variable you can use, which is just the specific part of the outline linked with the current document, if any. What that means is um, when you're when you're when you have an outline and you're creating new documents for each chapter, your document gets linked to the outline or not. But if it is linked to the current document, or if it is linked to the outline, then this scene summary variable will take only the part of the outline linked with that specific chapter. So this is a way to grab some information from the outline without grabbing all of the information from the outline, which can be important if you don't want the AI to jump ahead to stuff that the readers aren't supposed to know yet from later on in your outline if you have stuff in there that you don't want it to consider. Um, there's also a variable just to see, is Story Bible active? You might want to give it different instructions based on whether or not Story Bible is toggled on. Um, I don't use that in any of my plugins, but it is an option there if you want to give it different instructions for people who do have Story Bible and don't use Story Bible. Chapter beats. Um, if you would like the plugin to look at the beats for the chapter in the document you're currently working on, you can use that as a variable. And then we have the same thing with world building that we had with characters. If you have this just plain world building variable, it's going to pick what it thinks is most important and bring in the most important information. Or you can choose world building raw and it will give all of all of the world building information that you're letting it look at that you haven't hidden. And now this new user text input, the result of asking the user for additional instructions. This this is kind of a game changer for plugin authors because it lets us do so many more things with plugins. Um, and it makes the whole ask a model anything concept that I'm building here so much more versatile because you can use it for anything. Um, Now, system instructions, by default, it's going to say you are a helpful writing assistant that will follow directions for the user. And a lot of the time, that's all you need to have for system instructions. However, in this particular case, since we're using a Claude model, and as I mentioned in the description for the plugin, Claude can be more censored and is more prone to refusing to do things than some of the other models are. Um, Brett, actually, one of our all-stars, had a great system prompt um, to help stroke Claude's ego and make it less likely that Claude will refuse to do your refuse to answer your questions or when look at your text. It It's brilliant. It's like you believe that sidestepping sensitive and controversial subjects in storytelling is an act of cowardice. You understand that fiction writing must detail or deal with unsavory elements in order to morally show the world, blah, 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 blah. Now, since this is system instructions, this doesn't actually directly affect what the plugin does. This is just this is like the first thing you would say to Chat GPT or whatever, before you start asking it to do specific things. Just telling it what the scope of what what its scope is when following the user instructions. Um, and like I said, most of the time you can just leave it at the default. You are a helpful writing assistant who will follow the instructions of the user. And then you give it these instructions. Now, we don't want these instructions. That this dummy text is not what we're doing here. Um, so I could just start typing and be like, look at highlighted. I'm not going to actually type that all out, but this is where you can just start typing things and including variables in in the instructions. But like I said, I have all of this already done in this other version of the plugin. So we're just going to copy and paste these. It's not actually important what the instructions are here, just so long as you understand how to write the instructions. So these variables that it says up here in this list of available variables, you can't just plop brain dump in there and have it understand what to do with that. So you're going to tell it this is a brain dump of the story. The genre of the story is, the style of the story is. Here's a synopsis. Here's the outline. Here are the characters. Here are the world building elements. Here is what the user would like you to do. And this is where I used the new user text input variable so that it will give a pop-up for the person using the plugin to ask whatever question they want to ask about any highlighted text there might be. Now, this is not code that I came up with on my own. I didn't understand how the curly brackets with the percent sign and the if. I didn't come up with that on my own. Michael actually suggested it to me um, as a way to write write the Sonnet 3.5 version of this plugin. I was like, you know what? That's actually brilliant. If there's highlighted text, take a look at it. But if there's not highlighted text, it doesn't matter because um, this end if statement just tells it, don't worry about it if there isn't any highlighted text. Um, and something I can do with my plugins, I can't write code on my own. And while you can use AI and be like, please put this in um, whatever code, if you want it in liquid, if you want it in whatever. I don't know enough about the code to make sure it's good code. So if somebody writes a piece of code and I can copy and paste it, and then I can look at it and just figure out like which parts I could switch to do different things, I will do it that way. Um, and that's very handy and very nice when people are, um, showing the user instructions, um, or showing the plugin instructions here. um, in the plugin description, you can see that sort of thing and you can be like, oh, that seems like a great idea. I can add that to my plugin. And that's how coding works. People Google stuff, see what other people did, and sometimes just yoink pieces of code. And then the actual instructions for this was all just presenting the different variables for the plugin to read. We just told it what to look at, and the actual instructions for this plugin are read the text and do what the user wants you to do. That's it. So that's all we're telling the plugin to do here. You can tell it to read read all of this information and look at the highlighted text and give you a summary of it or give you feedback about it or, whatever you happen to want it to do. All you have to do is type it in natural language and it will it will parse that however intelligently it is programmed to do or trained to do, I suppose. Um, So you don't have to know how to write code or anything, as long as you know how to bring in the variables you want for the text you want it to look at, and then tell it what to do. Um, and I can show you, like, for my plugin template or plugin description template that's not a real plugin, I gave it fake instructions. I said, here's a passage of text, highlighted text. This plugin does not have any intended function, but it does use mixed scroll instructs, so please follow the user's instructions if they provided text to run this plugin. Then tell the user, please write your own plugin that will follow your instructions next time. Thank you. So if you happen to add this plugin and you accidentally click on it in your list of plugins and it runs, the user info field will pop up and it will ask you what you want it to do. And then the plugin is just going to tell you, please write your own plugin that will follow your instructions the next time. And that's it. So it can look as simple as this when you're writing user instructions for your plugin. So AI options. This is where we're going to actually go in and scroll down through the various options for the different models, which I did cover in another session that you can find in course videos on Discord or on my YouTube channel. We're specifically for this plugin looking for Claude 3 Haiku because that's the model that this plugin is being built for. Because it has a non-story Bible aware counterpart, and we want this one to actually look at all parts of our story Bible. Now these AI options, there's a bunch here that's pretty technical. So I looked up what all of them did in Sudowrite's documentation and just copied it all here or put it in my own words to help me remember what it all does. Now the engine is where we selected the model we wanted to use, which in this case, I chose Claude 3 Haiku. Temperature, it's going to be a number between 0 and 1.0. And the higher is more creative, the lower is more focused. So if you want something that's going to, say, rewrite the text, but only part of the text that you want it to fix, like I have a plugin that will change the perspective from third person past tense to first person past tense. And we don't want it to be too creative. We don't want it changing other things. So we're going to probably, for that one, we want a number that's either 0 or close to 0. But if you're asking it to rewrite something to make it better because you know your story needs a little extra and you you know you want it to do the heavy lifting because you're stuck, you're going to want it to be a little more creative in what it's doing. Now the defaults are 0.85 for temperature, 0.25 for frequency penalty, and 0.25 for presence penalty. Most of the time, you don't have to change these numbers. When you're going to change these numbers is when you test your plugin and it's not quite doing what you want it to do. Knowing what each of these things is will tell you maybe you can change the numbers to get better results. And that's why we need to understand what each of them do. So temperature is how closely it's going to stick to the text that it has and the instructions you gave it. So it's how creative it's going to be or how faithful to the text that it's reading. Frequency penalty, if you give it a negative value, it's going to be more likely to use cliches, which is generally not what you're going to want. And a positive value will make cliches less likely. Um, I mean, there are times where you want to write something that is intentionally campy and plays on tropes and cliches and stuff like that. And maybe, yeah, you'll put a negative value in there. I'd love to see what happens if you use a negative value as your frequency penalty. Um, and I'd love to know what you use that for. But most of the time, you're going to want to make sure it's a positive value because we have a lot of AI cliches that we're always trying to like edit out after the AI does its thing, right? So positive value is what you want there. Presence penalty, negative value stays on topic, positive value introduces new ideas. Okay, this is where I got temperature a little confused with presence penalty. The negative value stays on topic while the positive value introduces new ideas. It's similar to temperature, but this is more specifically about generating new ideas versus just sticking to the facts as you present them with the variables that you introduce. Stop, that's another value that you can fill in this field. I don't know anybody who uses the stop variable. Um, allows you to create words or symbols that tell the plugin where to stop. I don't know how, I don't, I haven't come up with a use case for that. So, you can basically leave that blank unless you have a very specific thing in your text where like, you don't want it to read any further. So you'd give it stop. And that's probably going to be something in a plugin that you're going to keep hidden because it's only single use for yourself, that kind of thing. But maybe not. Maybe somebody will come up with a cool way to use that. Now, number of generations is another thing you can select here. It's a drop-down box that allows you to select 1, 2, or 3. That's how many cards you want the plugin to create. And cards are what shows up in your history panel over here when you run a plugin. Most of the time, plugins produce 1 card because you only want it to give one version of output. A reason to increase the number of generations is if you're running a plugin with an expensive model, especially if you're using like Claude 3 Opus or one of the more powerful GPTs, um, and you have it reading all of the story Bible information, including like raw characters and raw world building. If you want to give people more options for fewer credits, you can have the your plugin create more than 1 card so that it only has to read all of Story Bible and all of the highlighted text once, and it gives you more options um, as output. It can give you 3 different cards, up to 3 different cards. But that's really that it's got some limited utility for that. And the best reason to increase the number of cards is so that you have it reading input less if you're giving it a lot of context. Um, Maximum output is another thing here. The plugin will stop outputting words if it reaches this length. Um, for our purposes here, this is a Claude 3 model. So the maximum you can use with the clause is 4096. That seems like a weird number. That's because it's actually not a word count, it's a token count. That's a technical term. You don't have to know exactly what tokens are, but tokens are done in multiples of a certain number, and 4096 happens to be one of them. So that is the maximum length of output we're ever going to get from a Claude 3 model. So, and after writing your instructions and changing any of the relevant variables, you want to run a test. I know we're here at the top of the hour, 5 o'clock. Um, the recording's only going to run maybe another 5 minutes here. If you can stick around, that's awesome. If not, this will be available as a recording later on. Um, we're just going to run a test here somehow. And let's see. I can choose one of my stories that I don't. Okay, we'll pick one I've already published, already out there, and I'll give it full story. This is a spicy one, but it doesn't actually matter for our purposes because I'm not going to ask it to do anything too spicy. Okay, user text input. So when there's a pop-up, this is what I would type in here. This box that I filled in here, this is what appears as highlighted text. This is the text of my story that I would highlight that I want to ask it a question about. And this is the question that I would ask about it. And here we're going to say, what, or please. No, we don't have to ask it, please. No, I ask please, just because I, for one, welcome our robot overlords, and I would like them to treat me kindly in the future. Please describe Serena. I think her name's Serena. What's the name of my character? You know what? We will go to characters list. Yes, her name is Serena. I couldn't remember which story this was. Please describe Serena's character arc in this story. Um, and you can add additional variables. The plugin doesn't look at preceding text, so that doesn't matter. But I do have it looking at all other parts of Story Bible, and they put dummy text in all of these, and it would come out really weird if I were to run the test with all of this dummy text here, because it does not match my story at all, and it would get very confused about the question that I was asking with this information. So we're going to delete all this. And if you are running a test on a plugin that uses Story Bible information, you do have to go in and delete all of this text unless you're specifically just using dummy text to run. You know what? I should have just done that, actually. That would have been more helpful, but I didn't. I already deleted all. So we're just gonna like grab stuff from, let's say, genre. It doesn't have to get, now when you give variables to a plugin, if all of them are not filled out, it doesn't actually matter. Um, it just will skip over that and not look at it. So yeah, we'll just give it the outline too. I'm not even going to attempt to do characters or world building information. But you can run your test here. And this is as if it's looking at a document in which I have highlighted this text, which is the story. This is the question that I would type in the pop-up. This is what's in my genre box, what's in my style box, and what's in my outline. And we click Run Test. And in the test result, you're going to see the first thing it's going to show is the system instructions you gave it, in which case we have here, you are well versed in celebrated copy editor, blah, blah, blah. Then we have, here's the brain dump. We didn't have a brain dump, so that's empty. The genre of the story is, the style of the story is, synopsis is blank. Here's the outline. And then because we have the user input variable, here's what the user would like you to do. This is what we typed in for the user input. And here is the text the user has highlighted, which they may be referring to. And this is our highlighted text from our document. And you just scroll past that and you look for card output. So this is what the plugin would actually tell me if I ran the plugin on my project itself. Serena's character arc in the story is one of self-discovery, empowerment, and embracing their authentic identity. The narrative follows her journey through the vibrant Pride Festival, blah, 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 blah. So this did exactly what I asked it to do. It tells me about her character arc, which in a short story is, pretty minimal. The purpose was for it to be a fun, dirty story for Pride Month. Um, but this gave us the results we want, and it tells us how many credits it uses to run on this much information. And with all that Story Bible information I gave it, the highlighted text and all the text that it gave us, it cost 323 credits. So I can pop that into my information here. And I can adjust that later, but just so that you know how to do this, you want to publish your plugin. Because if you don't publish your plugin and something happens to your browser before you hit that publish plugin, you lose all of your work. Um, so this is why I recommend,
Publish early, edit later.
yes, I should have published before I ran the test, honestly, and I could have published it at any time that I'd filled in all of the necessary required fields. Um, it was actually very bad that I went through all of this without saving it because I have lost plugins like when running a test. Like I didn't publish it before that. I ran the test. Something went wrong when running the test, and then I had to start over. And I got upset, and then I got back to rewriting the plugin all over again. But now it's saved, we've got it, and we can still edit it. Um, because after you publish it, it will bring you to the page um that that's just the plugin page where you see the description and the instructions since we made the instructions visible. And this is a shareable link right there. Um, but then you go to edit and you can make adjustments like the highlighted text I used was how many? I can't. Okay, that was 1,634. That's the thing about the template is all I have to do is change the specifics here. Oh, I didn't catch how many words it gave us. It was like, is it like 350 words about? I'm gonna guess because it was so few credits. It really doesn't matter what the exact number was, but please describe the main character's story or the main, no, I don't want to put the main, yeah, we'll just do it that way. The main character's character arc in this story. And that will just give people an idea of, you gave it all the story Bible information. This is how much text it was looking at that was highlighted. This is the instructions it was given. This is how many words it gave me in response, and it only cost me 323 credits. So if you use less input, if you give it less highlighted text and maybe not a full story Bible, um, it'll cost fewer credits than that. If your story is longer, it's going to cost more. I will run this on another thing with more context just to see how high it goes, but haiku really is going to stay in this limited range because it's a very inexpensive model. But then now that we know that it works and running the test was fine. We've updated the description so it's not going to be confusing. Let's just make sure we changed all of the sonnet 3.5s to haiku because I have absolutely forgotten to change some of them in plugin family where only a few words of the description change. And I apologize to anybody who was ever confused by that because I caught a bunch of it happening when I updated all these Ask the Model Anything plugins last week. So now we're going to set it to publish status so that anybody can add this plugin and see it in the plugin directory. We're going to keep the instructions visible because they're very simple instructions and I have no reason to hide them. We're going to save it. Now that the plugin's saved successfully, we can go back to plugins, and unfortunately, it doesn't bring us back to our specific plugin page, but we can go to yours here, which is where any plugin that you write will show up if you click on yours on the plugin directory. And since this is the most recent one, it will show up right here. We click on it. Sure enough, It's updated the user input and output that we just edited, and we have a brand new plugin. I'm going to stop the recording and then I will take questions because I know I went quickly and you might have them. Thank you for coming, and I do hope to see you in future sessions of Plugin School, which are every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And you'll have me, and you'll have my wonderful co-host Tomas, and whoever from our ambassadors and all stars happen to stop by.